Part 13. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 121. Hello, we are here to deliver a gift to Lord Nordmark. Put your things aside. Get out. Todd. Todd. How are you? Dash. Your Majesty said you are not allowed to come in. Get out. See a doctor first, I feel so uncomfortable. Get out. Get in line. Gretel snickered and floated across the clinic hall. Hey, it's great to have a barbarian as a security guard. He's very strong, has a naive temper, and knows everything. He would only recognize what Greet said, and others would argue, and quarrel with him. Useless. Besides, most of the visitors immediately gave up communicating and obeyed as soon as they saw that they were barbarians. Hospital efficiency has been greatly improved. Alas, in the previous life, why couldn't we hire a group of barbarians as hospital security guards? The value of the barbarian security guard, or the followers given by the teacher, reached a new peak after 1 month. Greet was inexplicably taken to the city lord's mansion, where all the nobles, mages, priests, and knights in Heartland City gathered together. The city lord, Viscount Joan, waved his scepter and spoke indignantly. Those rebellious officials and traitors have usurped the throne. They supported a false king, trampled on the flesh and blood of the previous king, and put the real heir to the throne in prison. There was a slight commotion in the audience, but it was not strong, just like the summer wind blowing through the treetops. Greet blinked. Oh, it's a change of dynasty. What are we going to do? Send troops? How far are we from the capital? By the time we arrive, has the real heir over there been killed? Apparently more than one person thought of going together with Gretel. Everyone sat quietly, showing no indignation or shouting slogans. The Lord City Lord took a few breaths and continued shouting. The false king believes in the Lord of Glory. Those traitors and traitors want the Church of the Lord of Glory to return to the kingdom. The Holy Knights have already been dispatched. The Black Knights of the Inquisition will set foot on the coast next month. Inquisition. Greet was horrified. Exterminating witches, arresting heretics, hunting down heretics, burning at the stake, a series of history flew through his mind, and at the same time, the conference hall also shook. What? Such audacity, Baron Von shouted. Opposite him, Baron Seymour raised his fist angrily. Down with the false king. Greet looked left and right. Master Hermann's face was as dark as water, and the staff in his hand creaked, and his knuckles were a little white. The bald bishop slapped his scepter hard, and the heavy metal scepter hit the ground, causing a piece of the floor tile to crack on the spot. The oak staff in Elder Irwin's hand buzzed, with green leaves on the top, and it automatically said in the absence of wind. Drive away the glorious church. Yes. Blow them away. Calling all priests. Let the war begin. Start the war. Ah, so the pseudo-king is not important, but the Lord of Glory Church is more important. The memory of the original person came up after a while. The Church of the Lord of Glory has always been an important force in the kingdom. On the continent across the sea, the Pope can even canonize the king, the local area is slightly better, and the Church's conquest of the kingdom is not complete. Even so, the king and the nobles unite the 3 major local religious orders and the magic tower. It was with great difficulty that they were able to hold on to their power without being completely eaten away. In the Great War 3 years ago, the Temple of the Goddess of Spring, the Temple of the God of War, the Bishops of Nature, the Mage Tower, the Knights in the city and many other forces joined forces and made great sacrifices to drive them out. Moreover, it is said that Heartland City is only a corner of the battlefield, and big shots are fighting across the country. The Church of the Lord of Glory lost the support of the king, and was completely defeated in the competition between masters, and had to retreat to the mainland sadly. So, if they come back, Everyone is going to die. The temple of the goddess of spring, the temple of the god of war, and the bishops of nature will all be killed as heretics. The gods you believe in will be beaten into devils. Not to mention the magic council, the magicians on the mainland, the Lord of Glory will catch one and burn one to death. Let the war begin. Let the war begin. Fight them out at all costs. The temple of the goddess of spring is willing to send 10 priests to join the coalition. High Priest Horner was the first to speak with a sullen face. The bald bishop smashed his scepter again. There are 2 priests left in the temple, all members are dispatched. The nobles, big and small, were all talking. This one says I will produce 2 knights, 20 soldiers, the other one says I will produce 3 knights, 15 soldiers, and 2 sets of armor. Finally, it was the turn of the mage tower. Master Gearman raised his head from the long silence and slowly spoke. It's useless for low-level mages to go to the battlefield. I'll go alone this time. Elliot, Karen, and you guys stay to guard the mage tower to prevent someone from taking it away. Greet, you also. I'm with the priests. Gretel blurted out without thinking. Master Gearman paused and turned to look at Elder Irwin. Elder, you. Let him go. The elder smoothed his white beard and said softly. Don't worry, I'm here and nothing will happen to him. It's time to go to the battlefield. Greet shuddered a little. In his previous life, he had aided Africa, but at that time he was protected by the army, so he only had to concentrate on treating his illness. This time when we go on an expedition, we are surrounded by the city guards and the Lord's troops. Can those people do it? Otherwise, would it be better to join the team at the God of War temple? Those temple knights look reliable, they can even fight priests. Don't worry. I'll protect you. A loud, vague voice exploded in your ears. Greet was startled, turned around and raised his head, then raised his head, raised his head, raised his head. The cervical spine is bent backwards, and the head is raised directly parallel to the ground. A big man over 2 meters tall was looking down at him. He chewed it in his mouth, and there was meat juice flowing from the corner of his mouth, which looked extremely scary. Carrying a large bone rod in his left hand and a box of surgical instruments in his right hand, he strode over and threw it on the carriage at the door. Your Excellency. What else should I bring? Gauze. Cotton. Medicine, you come with me. I'm so touched. With such a strong warrior following me, my sense of security is at 10,086. The hospital is already busy. Gretel rushed directly to the storage room, pointing and shouting. Willow bark powder, bring it. Calendula infusion, bring it. Bring all the alcohol. Alum, take it with you, take it with you. Just take half of it and leave. How many spin tourniquets have we made? Only 20. Bring them all. Get some more wooden sticks and some strong cloth tapes, and make them along the way. Salt, take it away. This box is candles, take them all away. There's no need to bring candles, right? Looking at him acting like he was moving, Priest Donald finally couldn't help it. Who here doesn't know how to use light? Are you sure you will still have spells when the time comes? Gretel choked back. On the other side, Bernard bent down and lifted up the box of candles, which was already on his shoulder easily. Thanks to @book friend 20210421142938819 for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to @Vunai Smile for tipping 100 starting coins. This book will be on the shelves on June 1st. Please continue to support me then. Book Club Group Number 649136249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. Please collect, recommend, and review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 122. Elder Irwin, please join the main camp in the attack sequence. Bishop Martin, Please join the front camp and be responsible for blessing the attacking knights with divine magic. Priest Edwin, please take the lead in the treatment work. Sir Baird, can you go with the scout team? Gretel sat far away from the door of the chamber, waiting for tasks to be assigned to him. He is the youngest, has the lowest rank, and his seat is farthest away from the chief. The 5th level priest has only been called now, and it will be too early to wait until he is called. In this battle, Heartland City did not go out alone, but gathered under the Lord of Neuster County, Earl Newman. Earl Newman himself is a 12th level Grand Knight and has a long-standing reputation in the county. Even the Lord of Heartland City, Viscount Joan, worked as an attendant in the Earl's mansion when he was a boy. With such a person standing high and shouting, the nobles of Neuster County will naturally look at the scenery. Nobles from 4 or 5 cities in the county came with their own knights and soldiers to join Earl Newman's army. All the spellcasters were also gathered together, and after evaluation and discussion by the leader of the cult, they were assigned to different teams according to their ability level and type of magical spells. Or attack, or assistance, or treatment, or service. After a long list of names, it took a long time to finally click on his head. All 2nd level and 1st level priests and priest apprentices are all responsible for healing matters. The allocation of treatment tasks is almost based on place of origin. In principle, the injured in the city will be treated by the priest of the city. Before the war started, the casters' camp in the military camp was bustling with activity. In each small tent where the priest lived alone, knights came to visit and gave gifts with smiling faces. Please take care of me. Please support. Please give me priority in treating me if I get injured. Gretel is no exception here. Just after the meeting ended, 2 knights asked questions all the way and came to his tent. Lord Nordmark. Lord Nordmark. Gretel. Gretel. Hey, where did you go? Such a rare opportunity, why not wait in the tent to receive the gift? Gretel was at the nearby city guard camp. During this expedition, the city guard came with 2 squadrons and about 100 people, most of whom were uncles that Gretel was familiar with. Different from the exquisite small tents at the pastor's place, the military camp here is full of tattered short tents, the kind where a dozen or 20 soldiers squeeze into one room. Walking a few steps inside, the stench is overwhelming. Gretel didn't dislike it much. He walked slowly in the camp, asking, Tang En, are the bandages ready for the wound? Brother Vale, you are going to be at the front, are the tourniquets ready? Do you remember where the tourniquet is? Yes, it's right here. Uncle Morgan, did you bring your triangle towel? Is it clean? Old Pete, if you're injured, don't grab a handful of dirt and block it up, tie it up with a triangle towel, and come to me as soon as possible. Yes, remember to come to me if you are injured. I'm at the very edge of the priest's camp, on your side. Captain Flynn, can you find someone to accompany me to get the tent? There will be many wounded soldiers, so I only brought a small tent. I'm afraid it won't be enough. It's a small thing. I'll ask 2 people to accompany you. Paul. Quincy. You go with little Greet. The 2 soldiers took him on a winding detour to find the quartermaster of Heartland City. Unfortunately, there is no big enough tent in the city, so we can only ask the county. The quartermaster glanced at the only green leaf on his robe and rolled his eyes. Why do you need a big tent? Big tents are for noble people. Why do you, a little priest, live in such a big place? As long as there are people to live in, that's all. Gretel tried his best to keep his smile, just like asking the medical department to give him a green channel when he encountered a seriously ill patient who couldn't afford the money in his previous life and needed rescue. It doesn't matter if it's a little old or dirty, it doesn't matter if it's broken. I'll clean it up myself, please. He quickly stuffed a money bag into it. The quartermaster weighed it in his hand and threw it upwards. Listening to the tinkling metal sound inside, his expression softened slightly. Okay. Come with me. So, Greet received an old tent as he wished, which was too dirty to see anyone and had no merit except being big. The oil mud on the tent had become coated with paste. Gretel just stretched out his hand and a layer of black mud was smeared on his fingers. Fortunately, the two soldiers beside him strode forward, separated the tent cloth and poles, and carried them steadily on their shoulders. It's so dirty that it's enough to protect it from wind and rain. If you want to use it to take care of wounded soldiers, you might increase the probability of infection, right? Gretel smiled helplessly and could only let them carry the tent to the river, roll up his sleeves, and work hard to clean it. One of the two men following him jumped down to help, while the other saw that the situation was not good and quietly walked away. Gretel was squeaking, 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 and after struggling for a long time, he only cleaned about 1 square meter. Most of the tent fabrics are still piled dirty on the shore. It seems that there is still a long way to go before the entire tent can be used. Little Gretel, we are here to help you, someone suddenly shouted from behind. Greet looked back in surprise. Uncle Karen. Little Greet, you're really here, the city guard soldier who walked away before was covered in sweat from running, and led Captain Cullen's team from a distance. Captain Cullen was extremely happy when he saw Gretel. I was not here just now. I heard Vala and the others come to you directly when they are injured. Can others also come to you? In the past, those priests only treated knights. People like us can only take care of it ourselves. Come to me, Gretel nodded heavily. Uncle Karen, I grew up as a city guard. I won't ignore everyone, others can do it too. As long as I am busy, I will treat it. Uncle Karen, please spread these words, quietly yes, don't make such a noise that all the nobles will know. Little Greet, I knew you wouldn't forget us. Captain Cullen patted him on the shoulder fiercely. Are you painting the tent? Brothers, stop standing there and go down to help. 7 or 8 people jumped down. The huge tent cloth was spread out in the river, and the clear river water was dyed black in the blink of an eye. Gretel wanted to refuse. Captain Cullen dragged him away directly. Let us do this rough work. Little Gretel, go back, what are you spellcasters called? Meditate. The more capable you are, the more stable our lives will be. Gretel struggled, and failed, and was carried back to his tent by Captain Cullen. A few dozen steps away, I saw a few people milling around the tent. When they saw Gretel, they waved hello from a distance. Little Greet, here we come. Gretel Nordmark Field Medical Clinic, everyone is here. Thanks to @book friend 201812051045111742 for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to @Yinhuaxi for the 300 starting coins. Thanks to for the 100 starting coins from one person. This book will be on the shelves on June 1st. Please continue to support me then. Book Club Group Number, 649136249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. Please collect, recommend, book reviews, please vote for me. In the last 2 days, don't save your monthly tickets, remember to give them to me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 123. A group of priests surrounded Greet, all talking, vying to speak. Gretel was about to invite them in when a black pole slowly floated out from behind the tent. And I'm here too. The voice was extremely hoarse, and the eyes were so dark and deep that they looked like will-o'-the-wisps in broad daylight. On the top of the tent, a black cat with white gloves jumped down gently, landed in front of Gretel, and meowed softly. Master Lin. Greet was overjoyed and hurried forward. The necromancer Lin was the one who led Gretel into the field of magic. With his letter of introduction, Gretel was able to enter the mage tower to study. In the past few months, while studying magic, divine arts, and doing experiments, Greet never had time to see him, but Gretel would keep this kindness firmly in his heart. After a few months of separation, Master Lin En was still swaying with the skull on his black robe, but the black cat's fur was much moister. It was obvious that he had been living well these past few months. Master Lin, Mr. Troka, Gretel greeted him happily. When he saw Master Lin En, he thought of the golden skeleton that could only lift his head and dismantle his hip bones. He wanted to find an opportunity to play the game again. Long time no see. Are you here too? I didn't see you when we set off. Of course I'm coming. Master Lin En's smile was quite ugly, with his skin and flesh shriveled up and sticking to his skull. Only a doctor's eyes can clearly see the direction of facial muscle movement. Really smiling. That old Boygirman protected you all from behind and went to the battlefield alone. He also deliberately hid it from me. As a result, I rushed over alone, walked in the wrong direction, and almost ran into someone from the Church of Glory. Ah, Greet exclaimed. The Lord of Radiance, as the name suggests, is the most powerful against the necromancer. The healing spell's throwing of skeletons doubles the damage. How are you? I'm fine. Lin En smiled sinisterly. Kill them too. By the way, why did you come here? Aren't you a mage? But I'm a priest. I'm here to treat people this time, to treat injuries and save people. The necromancer looked at him accusingly. Priest. When you are a priest, you go to the temple. Why did you ask me to write a letter of recommendation? It's in vain that I work so hard to write a lot of nice words, and even came here to visit you. Gretel felt a little guilty when he saw him. He took half a step back and found an excuse at random, trying to appease the other party. By the way, if you have time, come over too. When I treat injuries, I use many surgical methods, cutting people open and sewing them up, etc. You can come over and lend a hand, and we can discuss it together. Lin's eyes lit up. He glanced at the tent expectantly, feeling a little moved, and finally shook his head. I made an agreement with Gearman. I'm going to go with the scout team this time. I'm afraid I won't have time for a while. By the way, this is what I found from those bastards. Take a look and see if there's anything you can use. He waved, and Mr. Trochka, the black cat, jumped forward and took out a bag from nowhere. It fell down with a loud crash, and the holy symbol, prayer book, small medicine bottle, etc., all shining brightly, fell to the ground. Greet subconsciously cast a detection magic. A white light shone in front of his eyes. He blocked it with his hand. The white light on the holy emblem shone directly through his skin, illuminating the bones of his hand clearly. Greet was overjoyed. This works for me. Great. Level 5. A 5th level magic item. The X-ray light source is available. No more borrowing it every time. He held the holy emblem and looked into the distance. Outside the military camp, a small city stood on a hill in the distance. The banners on the city head were bright and reflective. It was the city they wanted to capture next. Gretel had been following the team for so long, and he knew that this was Newark, a city in Midland County. It was the first obstacle on the path of the coalition forces and had to be overcome. The lords of Midland County believed in the Lord of Glory, and they were also the most diligent in introducing the Knights of the Holy See. There is a good port in the Earl's territory, which is rumored to be one of the landing points of the Church of the Lord of Glory. The Earl of Norman and his army hurriedly rushed to defeat the Lord of Midland County first, and then block the Lord of Glory before the Church of Glory came ashore. We're going to attack the city. Greet murmured. Since ancient times, attacking a fortified city will inevitably cause heavy casualties. Tomorrow's battle looks to be bearable. He ran to the city guard's barracks early the next morning. Holding a bucket of ink in his left hand and a pen in his right hand, he scratched people's arms and legs one by one and said, "Turn left. Turn right. Stand up straight. Oh, okay, if you are seriously injured, tie the tourniquet here. Remember." A group of soldiers looked at him with smiles, lined up, and obediently asked him to draw the line. Captain Cullen ruffled his hair with a smile. "Little Greet, don't worry. We still don't know if we can win today's battle." Gretel looked up at him. The original owner's feelings and memories of getting along since time travel were tumbling together. He muttered for a long time, but he could only struggle to say, "Come back alive. The war begins." It was quiet here in the priest's camp. Gretel could not see the specific battle situation, and could only hear the shouts of killing in front of him. The teacher told his followers. The barbarian Bernard felt itchy after hearing this. He stood up and sat down again, sat down and stood up again, holding onto the big bone stick. Gretel had to give him some work to do. "Keep helping me cut the splints. Try to cut as many as you can. God knows how many people will be injured later." He busily prepared saline solution, prepared alcohol, and put away cotton, gauze, bandages, and medicines one by one. Sure enough, before noon, wounded people kept being brought down. "Scott Knight is injured. Sir Terence is injured. Knight Vincent is injured." The priests took over the treatment in an orderly manner. Prayers were murmured, and white lights rose and fell. Soon, after the knights, ordinary soldiers in simple clothes were carried and ran past. "Save him! Please save him!" Blood dripped down. Gretel stood by the fence of the camp and watched them go straight to the nearby location of Melton's pastoral regiment not far away. Not long after, the sound of begging and shouting filled the camp over there. "No cure. Carry it away, carry it away. Put it aside. The knight can't cure it yet. Please save him, the captain was injured because of us, he has a young son waiting at home, and his daughter is getting married soon." Greet's face gradually became solemn. Before setting off with the team, when the plague broke out, and even when he first arrived in this world, he heard that the priest's treatment was basically only for nobles, and whether civilians could get it completely depended on the mood of the caster at the time. For this reason, he was well prepared for this trip, bringing enough supplies and preparing to treat ordinary soldiers as much as possible. However, hearing about it and seeing it with your own eyes are different after all. He sighed silently and wanted to go over to help those people, but stopped. At this moment, there were clattering footsteps, and the two leaders of Heartland City Guards led a group of people to carry the wounded and headed straight for Greet. "Little Gretel, help me. Thanks to Corgis Sheriff for the reward of 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to Book Friend 2020050908530985 for the reward of 500 starting coins. Thanks to Fee Yanxiu for the 100 starting coins. This book will be on the shelves tomorrow, so please give me an initial order when the time comes. Please collect, recommend, book reviews, please vote for me. Both the last day's monthly pass and the next month's guaranteed monthly pass are required. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right?" Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 124. Bring it in. Greet glanced at them and immediately shouted to them. After shouting, he turned and ran towards his tent. The city guards behind him breathed a collective sigh of relief, carried a stretcher, and quickly followed. "Gretel, you." Someone immediately wanted to stop it. Fortunately, Gretel is quite well known in Heartland City. As soon as the speaker opened his mouth, he was pulled by his companions. If he wanted to treat him, let him treat him. The first level priest's treatment capacity is limited, so he can't waste much. Why bother offending people? Greet had no intention of paying attention to the movements over there. He took a quick look at the injured, but fortunately, there was no one he knew. The problem is, the injured either don't come, or when they come, there are 5. One had a broken head and bleeding, one had his arms chopped off, another had his legs broken, the fourth had his whole chest collapsed, and the fifth was lying on a stretcher dying, with no clear indication of what the injury was, but I only have one pair of hands. Greet was instantly stressed. And others can complain, but he can't. He asked for the job, and it is indeed his wish to save as many people as possible. He picked up a basket, ran to the door of the big tent he had prepared, and stood to the side. Carry them in one by one. Give me a look before you go in. The one with the bloody head was the first to be lifted up. Greet leaned over to look and asked, "How were you injured? Did you faint?" "I was hit by a flying stone. I fainted just now. Now, I seem to be a little awake now. Brain injury caused by blunt force impact. Lost consciousness for a time." Gretel quickly glanced around the wound and added silently, "No brain tissue spillage has been seen yet. Not so quick to die." Greet immediately ordered, "Carry him in and lie down. Shave the hair around the wound and wipe away the blood. If the injured vomits, make sure he doesn't choke on the vomit. I'll see him later." Next. The next one had his arm chopped off. The upper arm was tightly tied with a cloth band, and his face was like gold paper. Although he was unconscious, he was still alive. Gretel glanced over and saw no other injuries. He picked up a rotating tourniquet from the basket and immediately put it on the injured person. "Carry it in and lie down. Turn the wooden stick hard, tighten the straps, fix the wooden sticks and then untie the cloth straps. I'll take a look later." Next. The one with a broken leg still had to observe vital signs, stop the bleeding, and carry him in. As for the one whose chest was completely collapsed, Gretel touched the carotid artery and breathing, rolled his eyelids, saw that the heartbeat and breathing had stopped, and the pupils were dilated 8 millimeters, and he immediately shook his head. "It's dead, carry it away." Next one. "How is that possible? Save him. Save the captain." The soldier carrying the man stretched out his hand to pull him. Greet stepped aside and shouted, "Bernard!" The barbarian let out an angry roar, stretched out his huge palm, picked up the opponent's collar, and threw it away like a ball. The soldier on the other end of the stretcher wiped his tears, dragged the stretcher, turned around and ran away. Greet continued to shout without even turning his eyes. Next. "Hey, it's good to have security guards, it's even better to have security guards with fighting power to crush them." Gretel sighed secretly. After checking the last injured person, he turned around and entered the tent. Glancing over, he saw that the injured man with a craniocerebral injury was still having his head shaved, so he passed him and went straight to the man with a broken arm. "Master Priest, can you let his hand grow back?" the soldier who brought in the injured asked anxiously. Greet shook his head quickly. "It can't be done. He has to have his leg amputated. If you bring a severed limb, if the blood supply of the severed limb is good, and I have enough time, I might be able to give it a try. Grow out of thin air? I definitely can't do it. That. Go out." With a command, the barbarian couldn't help but grab the person and throw him out of the tent. Gretel took a deep breath. Even though he was in a hurry, even though he didn't even have an assistant, he had to do this amputation. Blood vessel clamp, on. A big battle is ahead, and there are still many soldiers to save, and every ounce of mana must be saved. Gretel did not release the mage's hand. Instead, he lightly flew the scalpel and retractor, incised the skin 5 or 6 centimeters above the section, separated and raised the skin flaps, and dug out the blood vessels of the upper arm one by one. Brachial artery and vein, clamp, cut, heal the fracture. Deep brachial artery, clamp, cut, and heal the fracture. Radial accessory artery, middle accessory artery, superior ulnar accessory artery, processed, cephalic vein, basilic vein, processed. After several months of dissecting and treating rabbits, I have become very proficient in Gretel's release therapy. So many blood vessels had to be cut and sutured, but he didn't even use it to treat minor injuries. He just used a ball of positive energy to heal those millimeter-thick blood vessels. Then cut off the radial nerve, median nerve, cut off the muscle, and let the muscle retract upward to expose the broken bone. Above the cross-section of the upper arm, 2 centimeters below the height where the blood vessels were cut, a circle of color was dyed using magic tricks. "Bernard," he called to the powerful savage beside him. "I'll give you an axe. Can you hit it exactly where I'm dyeing it?" "No problem," Bernard looked down and slapped his chest. Gretel set up the injured person's severed limb, carefully wiped the axe blade with alcohol, and handed it to Bernard. "Cut it right. Don't chop it diagonally. Brush." The axe blade was down. The limbs that had to be sawed off for a long time by the orthopedic experts fell to the ground with one blow from the barbarian's axes. "Do not." Another scream came from the tent door. The soldier who was thrown out rolled and crawled over and rushed over. "Captain, Captain." "Huh." The injured did not scream or struggle at all. The blood vessels and nerves had been cut off beforehand, so the axe didn't bleed much and didn't cause too much pain. The soldier rushed forward and saw Greet fish out a ball of something from the jar and rub it on the broken bone. Then he continued to pick up the tweezers, turned down the skin flap that had been set aside in advance, and wrapped the section properly. After a minimally invasive treatment, the incision of the skin flap, which was more than 10 centimeters long, was completely healed and closed tightly. This. Okay. I barely managed to save my life." Greet shook his head tiredly. He pointed to the corner of the tent, motioned to carry the injured over for observation, and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Next. Closed fracture of femur, detection magic, traction reduction under the guidance of X-ray." The skull fracture was confirmed by X-ray to be a linear fracture of the skull, which did not sink into the brain. There is no CT, no MRI, throw in a treatment technique, let him lie next to him, and pay attention. The last one who was in coma was found to have abdominal bleeding, the abdomen was opened for exploration, the ruptured spleen was cured, and the abdomen was sutured shut. Finally healed, Gretel straightened up after finishing the last stitch, and immediately heard his stomach growl. He was about to go out to find some food when an anxious voice rang out again outside the tent. "Greet, are you accepting anyone here?" "Get it." Greet turned around and ran out again. "Get in line, come in one by one, let me see it first. The book will be on shelves tomorrow. Please make your first order. If your first order reaches a certain level, you will get extra updates. Please collect, recommend, book reviews, please vote for me. Both the last day's monthly pass and the next month's guaranteed monthly pass are required. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right?" Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 125. Treat it? I'll treat it here. Send it here. Line up and come one by one. Next. 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 The injured knights came down one after another for treatment, and then returned to the battlefield one after another. The treatment area was noisy for a while and then quieted down. The priests ate lunch slowly, took a leisurely lunch break, then washed their faces slowly to wake up, and started drinking tea and chatting. They tasted rich black tea, spread honey and jam on freshly baked waffles, sat under a white parasol held high in the center of the camp, and talked softly. "There are not many casualties today." "Yeah, the fight wasn't too intense. I didn't use half of my healing spells today, how about you?" "I'm about the same. But it's better to save some healing skills." Who knows whether you will be seriously injured later? That's right, if a seriously injured night comes, I will hand over all the remaining spells. I hope not many people will be injured tomorrow. Hi, how's it going here? A pastor walked in briskly outside the camp, with a spring breeze on his face, and greeted everyone. Wearing a light blue silk robe that fluttered gently, with two narcissus embroidered with white silk thread on the belt, he was the second-level priest of the Temple of the Spring Goddess. Most of the healers in Heartland City recognized that this was the proud disciple of the county's great priest. They stood up and said hello. Priest Hilda. Hilda. We are doing well here. We have treated 5 knights, 2 were seriously injured and 3 were slightly injured. The slightly injured ones have returned to the battlefield. As long as there are not many injured people, we can withstand it. Just as we finished talking, far away, across a row of tents, there was another noise in the corner of the treatment area. Priest Hilda turned his head when he heard this. Isn't it over there yet? Over there? It's Gretel from the Natural God Church, treating the wounded soldiers. The first priest to say hello explained casually. At this point, I was suddenly surprised. Why are you still busy? I almost woke up. Yes, the man next to him also discovered the blind spot, couldn't help but stand up, and turn to look. How long has this been going on? Haven't the spells been used up yet? Interesting, Priest Hilda murmured. He raised his legs and walked towards the source of the sound. Have a look. The proud disciple of the high priest of the county wanted to see, so a group of priests naturally followed. There was a crowd of people shouting in front of them, and as soon as they turned around a row of tents, they saw the corner occupied by Greet with people running in and out carrying wounded soldiers. Behind the dilapidated big tent, row after row, wounded soldiers were already lying on the ground. If you look closely, you can see that the wounds on his body are all covered with bandages, and they have obviously been treated. Is this treating ordinary soldiers? Priest Hilda was surprised. I don't know how many people are in the tent, but as far as I can see, there are at least 10 or 20 people lying on the ground. Hasn't he used up his healing skills yet? No one around answered. Priest Hilda stepped forward on tiptoes and lowered his head to look. Although the soldiers lying on the ground were pale and moaning in pain, at least they were still alive, no matter what. And the tone. Next. A shout came from the tent. Low and hoarse, as if he hadn't drank water for most of the day. Then the curtain opened, and 2 soldiers ran out carrying a stretcher and lowered the soldiers on the stretcher to the ground. Priest Hilda came up to take a look. The soldier had 2 wooden boards tied to his arms and hung in front of him with cloth straps. There were also cloth strips wrapped around his shoulders, back and legs. Another wounded soldier who is likely to survive. He suddenly became curious about the priest in the tent and asked in a low voice. How many people has he treated? How many have he saved? A group of people looked at each other. Those who were familiar with Gretel, or those who worked in his hospital, were either on the battlefield or had other tasks. The others had finished their tasks and everything was fine, and no one thought to come over and take a look. Priest Hilda simply opened the door curtain and went in. As soon as he entered the door, he saw the light that healed minor injuries flickering gently in the dark tent. For a moment, the caster straightened up and said in a weak voice. Okay, bandage him. Priest Hilda took 2 steps forward. Only then did he adapt to the light in the tent, and saw that Gretel was a young man of similar age to himself, with a tired face and chapped lips. He was dressed strangely, with short sleeves and knee-length shorts, cut like a sack, with no logo embroidered on it. If it weren't for the healing technique released just now, someone would definitely believe that this person in front of him was a new soldier. Someone beside him responded, took the cloth strip, and tied it to the injured soldier's leg. Priest Hilda couldn't help but said, "Hey. His injuries haven't healed yet." "I know," Greet replied softly. My healing skills are not enough, I can only save them and use them in the most important places. Hilda was silent. He looked around and saw that there were at least 30 or 40 wounded soldiers lying inside and outside the tent. The therapist in front of me has been working non-stop until now. What level of priest are you? Level 1, Greet replied in a low voice, his voice so hoarse that it was almost hard to hear. After answering this, he immediately raised his voice with all his strength. Next. Another stretcher was brought over. Gretel lowered his head and got busy again. Priest Hilda stood at the other end of the tent in a daze, feeling that he had kept too much, and it would be a bit shameful to leave. While I was struggling, two voices sounded outside the tent, almost in no particular order. Gretel, I'm back. I'm here to help you. The tent door opened, and two God of War priests rushed in. Priest Hilda glanced at them, one was an apprentice, and the other was a 5th-level priest. Just as he was about to go up to say hello, Greet had already shouted. Change your clothes. Wash your hands. No problem, the two people ran over without stopping, and only nodded hastily to Priest Hilda. While running, they took off their priest's robes, ran to the edge of the tent, and each put on a short shirt similar to Gretel's. Under the surprised gaze of Priest Hilda, they washed their hands carefully, all the way up to their elbows. Then, while smearing something on his arm, he quickly turned back. Gretel. Where to begin? The row opposite, from left to right, Gretel shouted to the 5th-level priest. Follow the priest's apprentice beckoning. Come and help me, I'm exhausted. I tell you to do it. This is a broken bone. First use the detection magic to see where the break is. The queue of wounded soldiers that had just stagnated for a moment soon began to flow again with Gretel's voice. I was so busy that it got dark. Joanna and Alvin returned from the scout team, Priest Donald finished the logistics work, and several people joined in the treatment one after another. Gretel was finally able to take a breath, sat down on the side, and drank a lot of water. There was a creaking sound next to him, and Priest Hilda dragged a wooden box over and sat next to him. You just plan to treat these wounded soldiers every day? Why? There is no reason for saving lives and healing the wounded. When Greet finished speaking, he shrank back and looked at Priest Hilda quietly from the corner of his eye. How to trick him into saving people together? Although this guy has never made a move, he is still willing to stand and watch for a long time. He is someone who can be fought for. The teacher said it well, we must unite all the forces that can be united. He raised his sweaty cheeks and smiled slightly. Of course that's because it can improve your healing skills. Oh. Priest Hilda's eyes lit up. Thanks at Panasonic, ask Siemens Hire where to dig up the 1,500 starting coins for the reward. Thanks to Ed for the 100 starting coins from one person. Please subscribe, collect, recommend, book reviews. Please give me an initial order. If I can reach 400 in 24 hours, I will update one more chapter on June 2nd to reach 500, update 2 more chapters to reach 600, update 3 more chapters, and so on. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 126. Each person has a tent. If there is not enough space, we can use open space. Each person has an assistant, and the level is not higher than himself. There is no limit to the number of soldiers who can help carry the wounded. Priest Hilda stood in the open space next to the treatment area, a little dazed. How did things come to this point? Why did he agree to compete with that Gretel for treatment? Oh, he didn't just agree, he took the initiative to ask for the competition. It seems like yesterday, when we were talking, Greet said, What I do is helpful to improve my healing skills, so my healing skills are very good. It seemed that there was a hint of better than you, and next to it was a hint of better than you. Others are fanning the flames. And then somehow he came up and asked for a comparison? The people of the natural god religion are all treacherous. Even a first-level priest. By the way, why hasn't Gretel come yet? The sun is already high. After all, Priest Hilda was the proud disciple of the chief priest of the spring water temple in the county. Although he was unhappy, he was still calm. However, some of the classmates and friends who came with him to watch the fun, as well as the priests of Heartland City, could not restrain themselves and started chattering. Why aren't you here yet? Are you afraid to compete anymore? People from small places are. SHH. You don't want to step on your senior brother to climb up, but think about it later and regret it. It must be. Senior brother Hilda is so strong and is the teacher's direct disciple, how can he possibly be able to compete with him? Hilda coughed hard several times, stopped the group's random discussion with her eyes, and waited patiently. The sun had risen a little higher, and the sound of killing could be heard faintly in the distance, and Gretel hurried over. Sorry, I'm late. He was holding a stack of notebooks, sweating profusely from running, and had no words to apologize as soon as he came over. Little John, the priest's apprentice behind him, followed suit. He also held a stack of notebooks and stuffed them into the cabinet one after another. The breeze lifted the page, and Priest Hilda took a curious look. Sandy, male, 25 years old, level 3 warrior. His left upper arm was severed, and he was suspected to have lost 500 plus ml of blood. Supracondylar humeral amputation was performed. After the operation, the fever reached 39. What? I feel like I can't understand most of it. Taking another closer look, Gretel's eyes were red and bloodshot. Hilda immediately darkened her face, pointed at the pile of notebooks, and said reprimandingly, "Is this all you're doing? Didn't you sleep well last night? If the magic has not been restored, there will be no need to compete today." "I'm definitely asleep," Gretel quickly replied. "By the way, he also wants to go to bed early, but can he not write the medical records? Can I skip ward rounds? Can the medicine not be changed? Even if there is no medical department to randomly check medical records and deduct money if they are not qualified, that is not a reason not to write them. It is impossible not to write, and it is impossible in this life. Only when there are cases can there be summary analysis, and only when there is summary analysis can there be papers. As for ward rounds and dressing changes, even if you don't get up in the middle of the night to do rounds, late rounds, or early rounds plus dressing changes, you can't omit it. It's pity how many people he treated yesterday, and he took Little John and the others with him that night to fill in so many medical records. He had to get up early in the morning and be busy with ward rounds. If it hadn't been for the fact that his mental strength had completely recovered after meditating, he might have really thrown himself into the street today. Of course, it is impossible to ask for leave. In emergency surgery, as long as the patient is not too sick to get up and is dripping with water, he has to operate on the patient. Priest Hilda looked at him doubtfully. Greet sweated silently and tried to change the topic. "Let's get started. The wounded are coming soon. Have you brought enough? Do you want to take a look at the supplies I have prepared and give you a share if necessary?" "No need." Priest Hilda's face brightened slightly, thinking that the other party's suggestion was considered thoughtful. However, it was really unnecessary to get a share, as the host, with the support of the Spring Goddess Temple and the main priest teacher, what supplies could he not get? If he hadn't agreed in advance and relied solely on his own magic, his medicine box would be filled with all kinds of healing potions, detoxification potions, and energy potions, and he would have won this game. The wounded soldiers are here. Start. With an order, the flow of people transporting the wounded separated at the entrance of the camp, one on the left and one on the right, and sent the wounded soldiers to the two-man tent respectively. Priest Hilda murmured a prayer, and gentle white light and light blue water light fell one after another, and the injured healed easily. At the entrance of the tent, the notary invited from the temple of the god of war counted loudly. 1, 2, 3. The fourth one. There was no sound from Greet's side. Only the wounded soldiers were seen entering horizontally, but the cured soldiers were not seen coming out vertically. In the tent with the curtain hanging low, only whispers of orders could be heard. Look. Lift it up. Hold it and stretch it to both sides. Saline solution. The notary on Greet's side walked from the left to the right of the tent, and from the right to the left, without even counting the word one. It was so boring, so naturally no one at the scene encouraged Gretel. The onlookers brought by Priest Hilda and the priests from the Spring Water Temple in Heartland City all gathered around Hilda and exclaimed, "This treatment is so beautiful. I thought it couldn't be cured, but it came back." As expected of senior brother Hilda, his control over the blood flow is too strong. "I can't do it. The speed of casting spells is 20% faster than mine." Hilda himself was quite proud. He held the staff in his hand and kept praying. There were beads of sweat on his forehead and he didn't even bother to wipe them away, which made the two junior sisters who were following him feel very distressed. However, the second-level priest can only heal minor injuries at most, and the spell slots per day are also quite limited. When the seventh wounded soldier was brought in, Priest Hilda encountered a problem. Why hasn't it been cured yet? Throw another one to treat minor injuries, but still no response? Oops, there's only one left. "Priest Hilda, are you still treating me?" the notary asked in a low voice. Hilda gritted his teeth. Rule. The last light rain fell. There was a feeling of overdraft fatigue in his mind. Priest Hilda closed his eyes and took a breath. In the tent next door, the notary at the door finally shouted, 3. Don't send the wounded soldiers away yet, I've finished treating minor injuries. Priest Hilda waved his hand gently and found a chair to sit down and rest. After a while, the time slowed down, and just as he was about to let someone send the wounded soldiers away, the other person said again, 4. Only the fourth one. I'm still 3 ahead of him. Priest Hilda struggled and treated 2 more wounded soldiers before his healing skills were completely exhausted. He slumped motionless in his seat, watching the red sun gradually move to the zenith, and listened to the notary opposite reporting the numbers. 9. He's on the same level as me, can he still be cured? I can't. 10. There is actually magic? This is not right. He is a first-level priest, so he should have less divine magic than me. 13. It's noon, how long can that guy last? At least come out for a bite to eat. 18. More than twice as much as me. Priest Hilda gritted his teeth and stood up. Continue to send the wounded soldiers. Hilda. I can still cure it? Ointments, bandages, whatever you can cure. The notary dutifully continued to count. However, soon, he loudly announced a series of numbers. 1 person died. 2 people died. 3 people died. Do you want to continue? With such serious injuries, it seems I can't save them without resorting to magic. Hilda looked across. Greet's tent is still letting people in like a stream. Although 2 people have died so far, the frequency of deaths is much lower than in his tent. Maybe, we should send people to the other side to give them a chance of survival? Hilda stopped sadly. In front of the tent opposite, the notary reported again. 25. Did you use energy potions? It shouldn't be, we agreed in advance not to use it. Ah, the little girl Lena slipped in and took a look. Her eyes were very sharp. If she couldn't grasp the handle, it should be gone. The shadow of the sun slanted again. The notary's cry rang out again. 30. No. The gap is 3 times, is the distance between me and him that big? There were whispers all around. When the game first started, those words of praise for him had long disappeared, and the admiring eyes had changed into something strange. Hilda gritted his teeth, strode out of the tent, and ran towards Gretel. I give up, can I help you? Please subscribe, collect, recommend, book reviews. Please give me a first order. If the first order can reach 400 in 24 hours, one more chapter will be updated on June 2nd to reach 500, 2 more chapters will be updated to reach 600, 3 more chapters will be updated, and so on. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 127. There was silence. Inside the tent, outside the tent. The notaries who counted the 2 of them respectively, the low-level priests, night attendants, and aristocratic children who followed Hilda to watch, the soldiers who were constantly carrying the wounded soldiers, the wounded who had just been healed by Hilda. One by one, they were stunned. Hilda actually gave in? The beloved direct disciple of High Priest Wilbur, the beloved grandson of Earl Newman, a rookie priest with a noble birth, actually gave up to a country boy. Greet was not surprised at all. After treating a patient on his hands, he bent down to wash his hands again. At the same time, he raised his head and smiled. You have not lost. The wounded you treated have all recovered and can return to the battlefield at any time, the ones I treated can only be said to be hanging on their lives. They have to wait for further treatment by other priests, or they can slowly survive on their own. Only by getting over it can you recover. At this point, you actually win. After Gretel said this, the priests and nobles who followed Hilda all relaxed their facial lines and smiled softly. That's it? If no one is cured, how can we count the number of cured people? That country boy still has some self-awareness, so he should admit defeat. They are satisfied. Priest Hilda himself was not satisfied. He took another step forward and said in a serious voice. But you saved more lives. If you follow what you said, many people can get through it slowly. I can only save 10 people a day, but you can save 30 people. Your healing skills are indeed better than mine, can you teach me? Another one fooled. Gretel almost gave himself a thumbs up. In the face of the war, soldiers generally did not receive magical treatment, so he led his people to save one by one. He greeted him warmly. It's not about teaching or not. We work together to save people. I still have a lot to learn from you. Then it's settled, Priest Hilda walked quickly to Greet's side. He leaned over to look at the patient who had just been carried over. He reflexively wanted to release the healing spell. When he raised his hand, he realized that the magic spell had been exhausted. He laughed. There are no spells left today, how else can I help? Help me take notes, Greet breathed a sigh of relief. He pointed to the shelf next to him. The 2 piles of manuscript papers he had brought over in the morning were all piled there. I said, remember. Emma, you have caught someone writing medical records. The familiar priests were either unavailable or too lazy to help, and none of the soldiers who helped carry the people were literate. Priest Hilda just dived into the pile of medical records. He was busy until the sun went down. He watched Gretel cut, sew, and pull, and kept hanging the lives of more than 10 seriously injured people in a row, and he was filled with admiration. Early the next morning, he hurriedly grabbed a few mouthfuls of food, packed a box of healing potions and psychoactive potions, and rushed to Gretel happily. Gretel! I'm coming. What is this? A rough short-sleeved top was thrown towards me. Gretel's voice was calm. Go get changed. Wash your hands. I want to wear it too. Hilda was shocked. It's okay to learn from the young man in front of you. The other person's healing skills are indeed better than yours. It's nothing to treat those muddy legs. If you practice healing techniques, you may not necessarily treat healthy people with a few cuts. Even if I help take notes, my hand is almost broken and I don't know what the use of writing is. It doesn't matter. Whose apprentice doesn't work for the teacher? He was considered to be of a noble birth, and he only had to do copying and writing in the temple. Those who were of a lower background were responsible for serving tea, pouring water, making beds, and folding quilts. But, change into such ugly clothes? Hilda subconsciously took a step back. He lifted a handful of his forehead hair and raised his chin. This detracts too much from my beauty. Is there anyone prettier? Never. The head can be broken, the blood can flow, and the hair cannot be messed up. He is the most handsome young man in the county. He is the target of girls' eyes. It is the center where the bards sing and praise. Do you want him to wear such an ugly outfit, with short sleeves, shorts, no lace on the collar, and no lines on the waist, and stay here for a long day? The female priests who come to see him will be heartbroken. No, that's what hand-washing clothes are, Greet replied dryly. Operating room sterility rules, please abide by them. What it is? Gretel sighed. He really wanted to say get out. In his previous hospital life, any intern who dared to enter the operating room without changing his clothes had been exterminated by the hospital. From the first year of college to the beginning of internship, if you have not learned the basics of aseptic operation, you are not worthy of setting foot in the hospital. Even in this life, the few priests who came to study in the hospital where he finally saved up were yelled out of the habit by him. You will never enter the operating room without changing your hand clothes and completing the 7-step hand washing method. But this person in front of me. Forget it, call it abuse if you don't teach it. He leaned over and rummaged through the box and pulled out a stack of white paper filled with words. The wounded haven't been sent down yet, I'll give you time to read it. If you don't understand, you can ask me. After you've asked me, either comply, or please leave. A thick stack of paper fell into his hand. Priest Hilda lowered his head and saw that on the first page, there were only 2 lines of words written in the title. On the sterilization effects of various basic magic and magical arts, comparison with high temperature and high pressure sterilization, and the necessity of the principle of asepsis in operating rooms in different scenarios. It feels like I recognize every word, but when put together I have no idea what it means. Priest Hilda gritted his teeth and tried to read on. The format of the paper is familiar. Speaking of which, although the relationship between the Spring Goddess Temple and the Magic Council is not close, if you ask the local Mage Tower to order journals, the Mage Tower will not refuse. There are often some fantastic ideas in the journals of the Magic Council, and sometimes they can promote magical arts. Priests who have pursuits will always find time to read them. But what does this paper mean? Priest Hilda read the abstract, keywords and author line by line. The summary is completely unclear. The keywords, magic, and unknown words put together can only make people think that the author is very imaginative. As for the author, Gretel Nordmark is followed by the Church of the God of Nature, the Mage Tower and the hospital. What does this mean? He entered the main text, and the more he read, the more dizzy he became. The first section, with both pictures and text, tells about a thing called bacteria. He was confused and only knew that this kind of thing could cause diseases. The second section talks about how to see bacteria. He can see it inexplicably. He only knows that this thing can be seen using something called a microscope and a method called bacterial culture. In the third section, he understood the paper and compared distilled water, instruments cleaned by magic tricks, water created by water creation, water purified by the clean diet magic, and the water element pool in the Mage Tower. Directly delivered water, as well as high temperature and high pressure sterilized equipment. Why not compare healing potions? Hilda blurted out. Gretel was busy arranging the equipment without looking back. Cannot afford. Poor. Not that cool. I also want to research the healing potion, but I can't afford it. A potion for treating minor injuries cost 50 gold coins per bottle. We did a comparative experiment and started with 4 bottles. How much cash does my hospital have in total? Hey, this priest Hilda is a trickster. Do you want to find a way to get some from him? Please subscribe, collect, recommend, book reviews. Please give me an initial order. If I can reach 400 in 24 hours, I will update one more chapter on June 2nd to reach 500, update 2 more chapters to reach 600, update 3 more chapters, and so on. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 128. After incision, there was no significant difference in the healing effect and treatment consumption of rabbits that were directly healed by magic. On the second day of healing, the tissue from the wound on the previous day was taken for bacterial culture. The bacterial content was similar to that of healthy rabbit tissue. There is no significant difference. This means that after the operation is completed and the patient is healed on the spot, even if the aseptic operation requirements are not fully followed, there is a high probability that the patient will not be infected. Priest Hilda rubbed his dizzy head and continued reading the paper. Although there are still many things that I don't understand, the person who wrote this paper is obviously superior to him in terms of his powerful imagination and rigorous logic. This alone is worth his effort to read. Line after line, paragraph after paragraph, after all kinds of incomprehensible analysis and drawing, he finally got to the part that he could understand. Feeling that he had found the basis, he whispered. So as long as you use magic to cure it on the spot, you can do whatever you want, you don't need to change clothes. Keep reading. Gretel's voice came from behind. It was crisp, neat, and decisive, with a sense of command. Those eyes, while the other party couldn't see them, were swollen, thinking about how to get some resources from Hilda. Anyway, the other party is the son of a big noble, and he is trained by the Grand Temple of the county and city, so he has money. As for the experiment, even if the field hospital cannot cut up the rabbit, it can still conduct comparative observations directly on the wounded. Priest Hilda shrank his neck and continued to look down. The wound was fully exposed and the rabbit was healed with holy light after 2 hours, body temperature, healing effect, healing spell consumption. The abdomen was opened and flushed, then sutured directly. 24 hours later, the rabbit's body temperature, healing situation, the treatment consumption during healing, bacterial culture results. Each situation is a full table. The table is finished with a curve, and the curve is finished with strange calculations. Hilda was so dizzy that she could only glance at 10 lines and try to jump over them, only looking at the conclusion. The above data shows that if the patient does not receive magical healing, or does not receive magical healing in time, the equipment and water used during the treatment will greatly affect the patient's healing process. For this reason, when magical treatment is insufficient or unavailable, it is recommended to strictly abide by the aseptic rules in the operating room in order to promote the patient's recovery. Divine treatment is insufficient or cannot be obtained. Priest Hilda took a deep breath and looked around. Today's siege has just begun, and the wounded soldiers have not been sent back yet, but the groaning wounded soldiers in the tent yesterday have already revealed a cruel fact. Treating injuries according to Gretel's method will indeed, definitely result in insufficient magical treatment, or some people will not receive treatment at all. He dutifully handed back the paper. I picked up that ugly hand-washing suit, closed my eyes, opened my eyes, closed my eyes again, opened my eyes again, and worked hard to build myself up mentally. Anyway, no one is looking at me, anyway, no one is looking at me, anyway, no one is looking at me, anyway, those pretty girls are busy today, No one is looking at me. He quickly changed into his washing clothes and smoothed his forehead again. The flowing and smooth blonde hair traced an arc and fell quietly on the forehead. The next moment, 2 pieces of cloth were thrown over the head. Hat. Mask. Put it on. Don't, Hilda screamed. My handsome face. Gretel glared at him with a dark face. Hilda resisted for a while with pleading eyes before surrendering, putting on a surgical cap and a mask. The delicate bangs were instantly crushed by the surgical cap, but Greet remained unmoved and called him to the sink. Come here, I'll tell you how to wash your hands. First, wet your hands with running water, apply soap locust, palms facing each other, and rub your fingers together. Just be satisfied, the surgical cap I provided is still blue cloth after all, I didn't throw away a green one for you. Hey, I remember when I was in the hospital, all the surgical caps issued were the same dark green as the hand-washing clothes. Everyone had to show their talents and get all kinds of small flower caps. He was slightly lost in thought while recalling, but without any delay, he washed his hands one by one according to the 7-step hand-washing method. With a grimace, Hilda followed the instructions one by one. After reaching the 4th step, she finally complained. Why bother so much, the skin has been washed off. Gretel. Do I need to teach you the 7-step hand-washing method again? Being a teacher is really troublesome. Hey, when I was doing missionary work in the past, what was the most convenient and intuitive way to educate patients' families on the 7-step hand-washing technique? Gretel thought for a second. Then, he pointed out with a sullen face, aiming at the mud puddle outside the door. Go, take a handful of mud and smear it all over the palms and backs of your hands. Hilda? Do not. Even if I disobey orders, don't torture me like this. Greet stared at him, tried to stare at him. The 2 men's eyes met, and they clashed for a while. Priest Hilda finally gave in and walked out dejectedly. Alas, this teacher has a really bad temper. The great priest treats him much more gently. He followed Gretel's orders and came back with his hands covered in mud. First, I wash my hands at will, left and right. The mud on my hands is always scattered here and there is still a little bit here, and there is not clean there. I apply it again, and then wash it again according to the 7-step hand-washing method. Hey! It's really clean. Priest Hilda raised his hands, turned them forward and backward, then opened his fingers and looked at the gaps between them, and clicked his tongue in admiration. Gretel's command voice has already caught up with him. Wash again. Wash the mud thoroughly. Okay. This time, Priest Hilda answered softly and quickly. After answering, while washing, he muttered and complained to the sound of running water. Why bother asking me to apply mud twice? If you had told me that this is a ritual of your order of the God of Nature, and you have to wash your hands like this before treating patients, I would have listened to you, wouldn't I? Gretel. You have read such a long paper, and the conclusion derived from the paper is that the law of sterility must be observed, and the sterile hand-washing method is a ritual of the religious order. Do you think this logic makes sense? I had to put several tons of water into my brain to convince you like this. This water cannot be distilled water, nor can it be rainwater created by water-making technology. He glared at Hilda fiercely. Are you, a priest of the temple of the goddess of spring, willing to abide by the rituals of the order of the God of Nature? Huh? This. Ha 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 ha. Hilda wanted to scratch her head. As soon as he raised his hand, Greet stopped him. Put your hand down. The upper part does not reach the shoulder. The lower part does not reach the navel. The sides do not reach the mid-axillary line. Don't put it behind your back. It's so troublesome. Hilda's hands were frozen in the air, not daring to go up or down. She could only secretly pray for a savior. Fortunately, a shout finally sounded outside the tent. Help! Coming! Greet turned around and ran out. Thanks to at Kutanshari for the 200 starting coins. Thanks to at Origami, Gart, at Fengxiu Yuling for the 100 starting coins. When I woke up in the morning, I saw that I was ranked 15th on the new book monthly ticket list. Expand the list on the homepage to see it. Woohoo, you guys are so good to me, even if I fall off the list now and can only stay on the new book list for a few hours, that's still time I've spent. Love you guys. There is nothing to repay, so I just coded words. Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 129. Save people. Come here, all the priests. Come here. Ed, go to the temple of the god of war to invite the archbishop. Melissa, go to the camp over there in the county and see if there are any high-ranking priests. Please come over if you can. Old Barney, hold on. Hold on. It's a seriously wounded person, and a seriously injured person that the priests present can't handle, or don't dare to take action on. Priest Hilda followed Gretel and rushed out of the tent, and was immediately stunned. Outside the tent, there were no stretchers or wounded soldiers. Only Bernard, the barbarian, stood with his arms folded and a big bone stick that was taller than a man poking at the side. Half a blade of grass was hanging up and down at the corner of his mouth, and he was chewing it happily. By the way, the injured are not soldiers, but knights, and they will not be sent here. Those who are qualified to invite an archbishop may still be a high-level knight. He followed Greet and ran forward. After bypassing a row of exquisite single-person tents, he rushed to the central open space and suddenly stood still. In the middle of the clearing lay a seriously injured knight, probably old Barney. His face was as white as his beard, and there was a pool of blood all over his body. A spear pierced diagonally from his abdomen and penetrated directly to his back. There was a circle of people around old Barney, and 2 attendants supported him on the left and right, making him lie on his side. One of them wore an armor with the same emblem as old Barney, and his eyes were red from crying. At a glance, he knew that he was the nephew or grandson of the injured person. Some people went to call the high-ranking priest, and some went to get the healing potion. 7 or 8 priests surrounded him and chanted hard. White light fell like rain, but no one dared to touch the spear. This injury. Hilda also froze. It's definitely impossible to treat minor injuries, and it feels like there's nothing you can do about the 3rd and 4th level priest's ability to treat moderate injuries. And this spear. If you don't pull it out, someone will definitely die. If you pull it out, someone will die on the spot. What to do? What to do? Take off his armor, a firm voice suddenly raised. Hilda turned his head and saw Gretel rushing past him like the wind. Cut off the spear and carry him to the tent. Quick! The armor is strung on a spear, a kneeling attendant subconsciously replied. Greet didn't even think about it. Twist off the connection on the side. Cut the plate armor through the hole and tear it to both sides. Really, why couldn't this kind of thing be done in advance? In the previous life, someone had to deal with this kind of steel bar penetration before going to the operating table. Usually it's the fire brigade. Oh, forget, there's no fire brigade here. Then there is no other way but to hope that someone will show their subjective initiative. Gretel cursed, knelt down next to old Barney, and reached out to touch the injured man's carotid artery. A priest stretched out his hand to stop him. Little Gretel, you. Before he finished speaking, an arm suddenly stretched out from behind and lifted the priest up. Hilda glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw that the barbarian had come closer at some point. he grabbed the priest by the collar like a chicken and gently lifted the priest's feet off the ground, raising his height by 2 feet on the spot. The barbarian didn't hit or scold him, he just turned the person away. "Don't hinder the master." The poor priest was attacked unexpectedly. His face was green with fright and his lips were white. He could only nod. Fortunately, Greet turned around and said hello. "Bernard, come help." The barbarian responded, let go of the priest, and ran over. The healers looked at the 2-meter-tall barbarian, and at least half of them subconsciously took a step back, their prayers garbled. Most of the high-level priests responsible for healing at the scene were priests of the goddess of spring water. Priests of the god of war have high survivability on the battlefield, and servants of the god of nature have strong survivability in the wild. Most of them have been sent out. The priests of the spring goddess did not practice physical combat power, so when such a barbarian rushed towards them, they were like a tiger among the sheep. For a moment everything was silent. There were 7 or 8 priests and priests present, ranging from level 6 to level 1, watching helplessly as the barbarian knelt down beside the injured. He stretched out his palm as big as a cattail leaf fan, dug a finger into the hole in the armor, then raised his muscles and shouted, "Open!" In a heart-wrenching creaking sound, old Barney's armor was actually torn into 2 pieces by him. Eyeballs were bouncing all over the floor. Even Priest Hilda, who was born into a well-known family, slowly opened his mouth and looked at Gretel, speechless for a while. "Where did you find such a follower? You are only a first-level priest, first level. When I was promoted last year, the followers my grandfather gave me were only 5th-level knights. Once a strong man takes action, he will know if there is any." The 2 knight attendants each held the spear shaft while the barbarian Bernard cut off the spear with an axe. Gretel immediately greeted, "Quick! Carry him in. Carry him into the tent. Your Excellencies, please continue to release the healing spell and just hang him alive." He turned to lead the way, and 2 knight attendants bent down to lift the stretcher and followed closely. The priests from the Order of the God of Nature and the Temple of the God of War followed immediately. The others still had questions, so they couldn't help but follow the crowd after being pulled by their companions, and ran towards the big tent where the wounded soldiers were being treated. Priest Hilda turned around and ran away. After rushing into the tent, the operating table was already surrounded by healers. Greet's figure in a linen shirt was submerged among them, and he could hardly be seen at first glance. Walking a few steps further, you can hear someone trying to persuade you. "Little Gretel, can you do this? If it doesn't work, just brush up on the healing skills first. I've already gone to call someone. Yes, this injury is too dangerous. Hey, do you really want to cut him open? Do you want to wait a moment? Mr. Martin will be here soon." Hilda stood on tiptoes outside the crowd and stretched her neck to take a look. Between the gap between his shoulder and neck, he saw Gretel holding a sharp knife and looking around. "Can anyone cast the tranquility spell?" "No. Forget it. Fortunately, the person is unconscious and can only be dissected directly. Anthony. Marino. Help pull the hook. Hilda. Be prepared." "I'm coming." Hilda squeezed into the crowd. Before he could stand still, the sharp knife in Greet's hand plunged into the injured man's abdominal cavity and made a slash. Blood surged wildly. "Ah!" Half the crowd screamed. The priests of the fountain goddess collectively took a step back. "Hilda! Draw away the blood!" Greet yelled uncontrollably. Priest Hilda reflexively began to pray. As he chanted, a stream of blood rose up like a rainbow and fell to the ground following his gestures. At the same time, 2 curved hooks, one on the left and one on the right, had already caught up with old Barney's abdomen and pulled it apart forcefully. The translucent mage's hands appeared one after another, gently reaching between the injured's organs, picking up, turning, searching, and pinching a broken blood vessel. Treat minor injuries. Coming. A white light fell. The lowest level 1 can be used by priest apprentices to treat minor injuries. No one in the 3rd or 4th level can just release dozens of them. The white light passed by, and the blood vessels healed immediately. The mage's hand relaxed slightly, and the bright red blood began to flow again. Treat minor injuries. I come. Treat minor injuries. Treat minor injuries. In old Barney's belly, the mage's hand searched in an orderly manner, bit by bit. The healing spells were lowered one by one following Greet's orders, and the gurgling blood flow slowed down visibly to the naked eye. The situation has improved, the 6th level priest who led the prayer suddenly exclaimed. The healing technique can be slowed down. 469 for all orders, 521 for first order. Love you guys. There is nothing to repay, so I just coded words. Please subscribe. Please recommend. Please review the book. Please vote for me to stay on the new book monthly ticket list for a few more days. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 130. Chapter 130 Little Greet, stop it. Has the person been saved? What is Gretel doing? What on earth did Greet do? I don't know, I can't understand. What about you? I'm not Joanna or the others. I learned from Gretel. Hey, just do what he says, he always makes sense. The therapists whispered among themselves. They didn't wash their hands, didn't wear masks, and kept talking to each other, less than 1 meter away from the operating table on average. The saliva sprayed into the injured person's abdominal cavity in minutes. Seeing the possibility of infection, add 1, add 1, add 1. If this were the case in the previous life, the traveling nurse would have kicked them all out of the operating room. However, there is no circulating nurse or head nurse here, and when there are more and more people employed, Greet can only turn a blind eye. He lowered his head, tried his best to ignore the comments around him, and concentrated on the operation. Clamping the superior mesenteric artery. The middle colic artery has been repaired. The right colic artery has been repaired. Superior mesenteric artery patency. The posterior intercostal artery has been repaired. The subcostal artery has been repaired. The middle colon vein repair is completed. Gretel muttered words that no one could understand, his fingers flew, and the command mage's hand kept flying in his abdomen. Free, loosen, expose blood vessels, clamp damaged blood vessels, then, signal the priest next to him to throw a healing spell. When the other party is confused, they have to use magic tricks to color it and give them instructions on where to throw it. Even so, the workload has been reduced a lot. Gretel sighed secretly. If it was in the previous life, after the blood vessel clamp was closed, I would have used tissue tweezers in one hand and a needle in the other to suture with all my strength. These arteries and veins are less than half a centimeter thick and up to 2 to 3 millimeters thin. After heavy bleeding, the blood vessels become even more deflated and difficult to see. But having small blood vessels does not mean that you can cut corners. You still need to sew as many stitches as you need, and tie as many knots as you need to. Before suturing, it is necessary to trim the outer membrane of the blood vessel and remove blood clots in the cavity. The pulling force of each needle must be neither loose nor tight. In an operation, half of the physical strength is spent on sewing and mending. What now? Just one healing spell and you're done. Not even for a second. The blood vessels heal perfectly and the walls are elastic. There is no need to worry about leaks or subsequent poor healing. A ruler is shorter and an inch is longer. Divine magic still has its benefits. Oh, by the way, if I have time in the future, I will do a comparative study on thrombosis after treatment and surgical suture healing of blood vessels. Greet took out a small notebook in his heart and wrote it down secretly. The mage's hands flew and he quickly removed all the bleeding blood vessels he could find, and also clamped the large blood vessels around the spear shaft that might be bleeding. Gretel finally straightened up and exhaled. Wipe the sweat. No one paid attention. Alas, he forgot that this world is not his previous life. Several doctors, priests, he trained so hard are now sent away to do other things. Gretel silently mourned for himself. Sure enough, the division of labor in his previous life made sense. In addition to doctors, he should train a group of nurses. At least there would be someone to hand him instruments, put on surgical clothes, wipe sweat, yell at people, forget about the last one. He closed his eyes and collected himself. He took half a step back, turned his head slightly and looked around, assessing the combat effectiveness of everyone present. Anthony. Marino. Here, shouted the two God of War priests. Gretel felt slightly reassured. The God of War priest's combat effectiveness was reliable, and it was easy to use. I once watched my own surgery and accepted my leadership during that plague. Now, every call is accurate. Hold the injured man. Lie down on the right side. Hold him steady, don't move, you must not move. Bernard. I am here. The savage stood outside the crowd and shouted in agreement. It was as if there was a thunderbolt in mid-air, the whole tent shook, and the simple shadowless lamp hanging on the operating table flickered, as if it was silenced by his roar. Gretel secretly wiped away the cold sweat and raised his voice. Come and help. With a crash, the pastors on the opposite side spread out to the left and right, like the Red Sea parting in front of Moses. Bernard rushed over. What's the matter? Hold the broken spear. Follow the direction of insertion, and don't tilt it in any direction. Gretel didn't even dare to say pull it out directly, so he could only tell the details in advance and try his best to warn. I count 1, 2, 3, and you pull it out in the direction, as steadily as possible and as fast as possible. Don't swing left and right to damage the things next to you. Pay attention to the others. After pulling out the spear shaft, release the treatment immediately technique. Are you all ready? Ready. Hold on. Wait for me to sing. The priests responded unevenly. If this had been the case in the previous life, the anesthesiologist would have been facing a formidable enemy, with a row of epinephrine and various other potions in front of him, ready to pounce on him at any time. The first assistant and the second assistant each held their needle holders tightly, preparing to suture. However, in this world, healers are chanting hard and preparing to release magic. There was silence in the tent for a moment. The atmosphere gradually became tense and tense. Apart from the high or low prayers of the priests, there was only the sound of the barbarians breathing. In this silence, the sound of conversations getting closer and closer came into the tent sentence by sentence. Where is the person? He was carried away. Oh no, this direction is to Little Greet's place. What? He won't start directly, right? Let's hurry up. Greet. Don't rush to treat me. A shout came from outside the tent. At the same time, Gretel calmly issued the command. 1, 2, 3. With a swipe, the spear shaft flew out, and the white light of the healing technique immediately rushed towards him. A gush of blood flowed out of old Barney's abdomen, and he soon calmed down a lot under the comfort of the healing technique. Little Greet, hey. There was a sudden light in the tent. Gretel raised his head and saw the bald bishop's big, shining head from a distance, and couldn't help but feel happy. Master Bishop, you are here. Can I not come? The bald bishop rushed over angrily, as if shouting, wait until I get there before I open the abdomen. He rushed in, only to find that the intern had already taken advantage of the chief director. Gretel shouted to him. Master Bishop. Use the tranquility spell. Thank God, a high-level God of War priest finally arrived and anesthesia was finally given. Although the injured person had been unconscious just now, it still felt strange to open the abdomen directly without anesthesia. Do you want to take the time to boil the hemp and relieve the liver? Or a similar anesthetic? To be honest, he was always a little scared to drink this kind of plant-based compound anesthetic that could not be controlled in dosage. How about trying to get some ether? What is the reaction formula of ether? Little Greet, you have to work harder. The bald bishop paused and breathed a sigh of relief. There is also the mood calming technique. It seems there is no big problem on Gretel's side. Hearing Gretel shouting, he raised his scepter and laughed. Hurry up and level up, and try to learn the tranquility technique as soon as possible. White light fell like a forest, framing the unconscious injured person. There was a low exclamation in the surroundings. The speed of this magical spell is close to instantaneous, and it is so far away from the injured and blocked by the crowd, but the effect is not bad at all. The bald bishop's healing skills are truly rare. It's a pity that not everyone buys this. A cold snort sounded from behind the bald bishop, followed by a sly and sarcastic mocking voice. Why, you still want to poach him to the god of war temple? 564 First Order. 470 are ordered. Much better results than the previous book. When I woke up this morning, I had already ordered over 500. Thank you all for your support. As promised, there will be 4 updates today. 2 chapters at noon are guaranteed, and the first 2 chapters in the evening will be updated. Please continue to subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Let me stay in the top 20, first page, of the monthly new book list for a while longer. Please.